friends, we are back today with a recipe involving my two favorite things, chocolate and cookies. Today's recipe is for gluten-free, keto-friendly chocolate fudge cookies. So yummy. And if you want a printable version of this, you can check out my website at janetsdeliciouslowcarbkitchen.com. You can find a printable version of this and other goodies there for you. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that big fat subscribe button. Also, don't forget to hit that little notification bell. That way you can be notified every time I put out a new video. And while you do that, let's get cooking. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Line 2 large baking sheets with parchment paper. In a large mixer bowl, combine 1 1/4 cups of almond flour, 1/4 cup of coconut flour, 3/4 teaspoon of xanthan gum. Do not leave this out, this is your binding agent. A half cup of cocoa powder, 1 1/3 cups of monk fruit sweetener or granulated sweetener of your choice, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Whisk these all together until they're fully combined and no lumps are left in the flour. Add 3/4 cup of butter that's been melted and cooled. Make sure it's cooled completely. 1 1/2 teaspoons of vanilla. 3 large room temperature eggs. Make sure they are room temperature. It makes for a much smoother batter if they are room temperature. And a half teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. Now, whether or not you need the apple cider vinegar depends on what type of cocoa powder you're using. The purpose of adding the apple cider vinegar is to add an acid agent that will combine with the baking soda, making the baking soda active so that your cookies can have a little bit of a puff to them rather than them just being a flat pancake. Baking soda has to have some type of acid agent in order for it to become active. However, if you're using natural cocoa powder, which is the cocoa powder that's generally found down the baking aisle in those little Hershey's tins of cocoa powder, that's natural cocoa powder. So if you're using natural cocoa powder, it already has naturally occurring acid agents in cocoa. So you do not need to add the apple cider vinegar if you are using natural cocoa powder. I ran out of my natural cocoa powder, so I'm using Dutch processed cocoa powder, which is natural cocoa powder that has been stripped of its acid agent, resulting in a deeper chocolate. So because the Dutch processed cocoa powder has had the natural acid stripped from it, I have to add an acid agent in order for my baking soda to become active. So that's why I'm adding the half teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, because I need an acid agent to help the baking soda to activate because I am using Dutch processed cocoa. So bottom line, if you're using natural cocoa powder, you do not need the half teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. If you are using Dutch processed cocoa powder, you need the half teaspoon of apple cider vinegar or your baking soda will not become active. Once you've added all the ingredients together, then beat on low for 20 to 30 seconds or until everything is fully combined and there's no dry ingredients left in the bowl. Scrape down the sides of the bowl and push all of the ingredients to the center of the bowl. Let the batter sit for 3 minutes so that the coconut flour can absorb some of the moisture and the xanthan gum can begin binding all the ingredients together. Once the batter has set for 3 minutes, give it a little gentle stir just to make sure that the batter has gotten a little bit thick and that everything is binding together. Then add a half teaspoon of baking soda and beat on low just for about 10 to 15 seconds or just until the baking soda is fully distributed in the batter. I always add this at the end after my batter has set for the optimum lift so you can get a nice fluffy texture in your cookies. Once the baking soda has been distributed in the batter, then scrape down the sides of the bowl again and gently fold in a half cup of chopped chocolate of your choice or chocolate chips of your choice. I make my own chocolate and chocolate chips, so that's what I use in this, but you can use any chopped chocolate or chocolate chips of your choice. If you want to know how I make my keto chocolate, I'll leave a link in the description and you can check that out so you can make your own keto chocolate to go in these. Either way, gently fold in the chocolate until it's equally distributed throughout the batter. Spoon the dough 1 to 1.5 tablespoons at a time onto your prepared baking sheet. Space the scoops about 2.5 inches apart because these cookies do spread a little bit. Once you've spooned the dough onto the prepared baking sheets, then use your fingers and shape each scoop into a tight ball. Then pop the cookies into the oven, bake them at 350 for 10 to 12 minutes or just until the edges get a little bit dark. Now these will be soft when they first come out. Do not try to cook them until they are crispy. You will have black burnt cookies if you do that. So they will be soft. 12 minutes is the max that you will need to cook them. They will firm up as they cool on the pan, so do not over bake them. Let them cool in the pan for about 10 minutes or until they're firm enough to transfer to a wire rack. Transfer them to a wire rack and let them cool completely before eating. If you're wanting to make your own keto chocolate chips for this recipe, or if you're just wanting to make a good keto chocolate bar just to munch on for something sweet, this recipe for keto chocolate is very quick and very easy. In a medium saucepan or the bottom pan of a double boiler, bring about 1 cup of water to a low boil over medium-low heat. It doesn't have to be a rapid boil, it just needs to be enough to be able to create steam because this is what's going to help cook your chocolate. Once it's come to a low boil and starting to create steam, place the top pan of the double boiler on top of the bottom pan, or if you don't have a double boiler and you're using a saucepan, place a heat-proof safe bowl securely over the top of the pan with the water in it. Make sure if you are using a bowl that it is heat safe and that it securely fits over the top without teetering or wobbling. And also make sure that the bottom of the bowl is not touching the water at all. That'll make the bowl too hot and then you'll scorch your chocolate. So make sure that it's just hovering over the water just enough for the steam to be able to heat the bottom of the bowl gently. Also, make sure your heat stays at a medium-low to low temperature. If you make the heat too hot, it'll cook the chocolate too fast and you'll either end up with a burnt taste in your chocolate or your chocolate can seize up on you and you'll have chunky chocolate. And nobody wants that. So once you've got your double boiler in place or your heat-safe bowl in place, add 1/4 cup of butter and stir it with a heat-safe spatula until the butter has completely melted. Make sure it is melted fully and completely. I usually like to cut my butter into cubes so that it melts quicker and more evenly over the heat. Once the butter has melted, add 2 tablespoons of powdered swerve or powdered sweetener of your choice. Make sure it is powdered or confectioner's sweetener. The granulated sweetener tends to seize up. You can't get it as smooth as the powdered sweeteners. So powdered swerve is what I use. It works the best. Stir it in continually until it fully dissolves. This can take 1 or 2 minutes maybe. You just want to make sure that every single part of the sugar is fully and completely dissolved. You don't want to have grainy chocolate. Once the swerve is dissolved, add 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder and 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Stir it with your spatula until the cocoa has fully dissolved. Make sure the chocolate mixture is completely smooth. Once it's completely smooth and there's no grains in your chocolate, pour the chocolate into a heat-safe measuring cup that has a spout so it's easier to pour into your molds. Pour the chocolate into the molds of your choice. If you're wanting to make chocolate chips, then put it into the chocolate chip molds. If you're just wanting chocolate bars or chocolate candy, you can put them into chocolate candy molds. If you don't have molds of any kind, you can pour them into ice cube trays and just fill the ice cube cups about maybe a 1/4 way up. You don't want a thick, huge hunk of chocolate, especially if you're going to use it in cookies. If you're just wanting it as a chocolate candy, I guess, if you don't mind a huge hunk of chocolate, you can fill it all the way up. But if you're wanting to use it for cookies or just as a little snack, just fill the ice cube tray cup about a 1/4 way full if you don't have molds. Once they're in the molds of your choice, then place them in the refrigerator for at least 2 hours or until they're completely firm. I like to do mine overnight. Really works the best because you really want to make sure that chocolate is firm before you eat it. Otherwise, it'll melt in your hand as soon as you get it. So 2 hours works if you're really in a hurry to get that chocolate, but to really get the full effect of it, you really need to refrigerate it overnight. Now this recipe makes dark chocolate, so if you're wanting a milk chocolate, then after the cocoa has dissolved, stir in 1 tablespoon of powdered milk or powdered coconut milk if you're going strict keto, and keep stirring it until it fully dissolves into the chocolate mixture before you pour it into the molds. Once the milk and everything's fully combined and everything's fully smooth, just pour it into the molds just like you would with the dark chocolate. Now, if you are wanting this chocolate to use as chocolate chips or chocolate chunks, then you'll need to place the chocolate chips or the chocolate chunks in the freezer overnight. Once they've firmed up in the molds, then place them on a baking sheet in a single layer and freeze them overnight. That way they're nice and firm when you put them in your cookies. Also, you might want to use just a little less than the recipe calls for if you're using this recipe for the chocolate chips. Homemade chocolate doesn't have all the preservatives and whatnot that store-bought chocolate has, so it melts quickly and can get runny really fast. So by freezing it, that helps it to melt a little slower when it's cooking in the oven in your cookies. It helps it melt a little slower. That way it doesn't get as runny as it would if you were to just make it firm in the refrigerator and then put it in your cookies. You can do it that way, but you run the risk of it becoming pretty runny. And there you have it. Gluten-free, keto-friendly chocolate fudge cookies. Eat and enjoy. And that's our recipe of the day. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that big fat thumbs up button and that big fat subscribe button. Leave me a comment if you want to. Let me know if there's any recipes that you'd like to learn how to make, and I'll do what I can to get those out there for you. And as always, keep cooking.